gave myself a challenge of interviewing 100 engineers to validate the idea. We're focused on really unsexy, ugly data problems that help make AI successful. They were really cool, like if you were showing somebody else, like on Twitter, who was part of like the RAG community. But like if I were to show my mom this stuff, she'd be like, "What's the big deal? Like this thing sucks most of the time." I think the 2025 is a year of blowing a bunch of cash on agentic systems.
Okay.
But I don't know if 2025 is when like agentic systems actually explode. I'm going to say 2027.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the VIP Deep Talk today. My name is Michał Lis, and I'm an AI engineering manager here at deepsense. Today, with me co-hosting this interview, we have Tomasz Rytel, our Director of Client Success and Partnership. Hey, Tomasz.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
And the special guest for today's episode is Brian Raymond, the founder and CEO of Unstructured, a company dedicated to transforming unstructured data into formats that AI tools can process efficiently. Welcome, Brian. It's our pleasure to have you here with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
All right. Allow me to introduce our guests very briefly, and then we are going to jump straight into questions. So, Brian founded Unstructured in 2022, and the company since then has quickly established itself as an innovator in the data processing space. Before that, Brian spent a few years as an intelligence officer at the CIA, followed by a role at the National Security Council, advising President Obama and Vice President Biden on foreign policy matters concerning Iraq, ISIS, and the Middle East. He then spent 3 years at Primary AI working on advanced AI solutions for US government and for Fortune 100 companies. Okay, Brian, so maybe we can talk about Unstructured and its background first. At DeepSense, we collaborate with a diverse range of companies interested in applied AI. However, when you think about it, and it comes to LLMs and RAG specifically, it seems that everybody these days wants the same thing, a piece of software that will be able to access the internal data that the company has and then answer questions with high precision and at scale. Could you tell us a little bit how Unstructured it can be used to achieve this?
Yeah, sure. So, thanks for having me today, and excited for the conversation. Look, at Unstructured, we're focused on really unsexy, ugly data problems that help make AI successful. And so, the way that we like to think about it is we want our users to be able to take any human generated data, so audio, image, natural language data, and render it into formats that give LLMs the best chance at success. And so our like the product that you leave Unstructured with is chunked embedded JSON, right? So data that's ready to be written to a vector database or a graph database. It's all in a shared schema, standardized schema, and that really makes it effortless for foundation models that are nested within typically like a RAG architecture to get the right answer quickly at a high percentage of the time, right? And so for us, our world is really everything to the left of vector or graph databases and making that effortless.
This is pretty impressive. Brian, I'm also interested in you personally and kind of the genesis of the idea behind Unstructured. Michał mentioned briefly your journey, your professional journey. Pretty interesting journey, I would say, like not your usual tech story.
Yeah.
CIA, National Security Council, primer.
Totally.
I'm curious, along that journey, when did the idea of Unstructured kind of manifest itself, and what made you convinced that this is the problem worth solving?
It was really interesting. It was the summer of 2021. GPT-3 had been out for about 16 months or so. At Primer, we were focused on knowledge graph generation. So we were orchestrating ingestion of pre-processing pipelines, generating knowledge graphs, and then building applications on top of those for our customers. And we had a range of customers in the defense and intelligence space, but also in financial, big banks and consumer products. We had really interesting kind of Fortune 500 customers. And at the time, I was running our global public sector business, and I had a view on all, we were a small company So I was able to look across everything we're doing for Goldman Sachs and Meta and others at the time. And it was really actually pretty simple for me as a business line owner. Our time to value and our cost to value on our deals were terrible. We were looking at like 6 months to a year of professional services just to stand up an initial implementation of our software. In some cases where we had larger deployments, we had spent more than 2 years just trying to curate data, and so it was killing us. And we reached out at the time to companies like Informatica, Trifecta, Fivetran, others, and said, "Hey, like we're dealing with PDFs, we're dealing with XML, we're dealing with a really diverse range of, in particular, natural language data that we need to render into chunk JSON." We weren't using embedding terribly much at the time, and all of them said, "Look, we'll move it from one place to another. We'll offer connectors, but it's up to you to, and however good you are at writing regexes, regular expressions, to transform that into clean data. We have nothing for you on that." And so I was pulling my hair out. We were considering making big investments at Primer, but as a leadership team, we decided, look, we're not an ETL company. We're a company focused on applications that sit on knowledge graphs, and that's really what we were. And so we'll just continue doing all this manual work on the data curation stage. So fast forward into early 2022, this problem at Primer didn't go away, and I actually talked to others in other companies, and they're like, "We're having handling the same thing." And so I was like, "Look, let me I think I want to go launch my own startup. I want to do my own thing." And I interviewed 100. I gave myself a challenge of interviewing 100 engineers to validate the idea. And through that process of discovery, I got a lot more nuanced view of this problem space, and it persuaded me that, look, models are going to get better. Models are getting bigger. That's going to solve a lot of the problems on the model side of the architecture. That's going to create big bottlenecks on the data side. So let's go build the data company. And so the rest is history.
Thanks for sharing that. And maybe to continue the topic of data curation and the models, it seems like at the moment we reached the point when this space is extremely busy and there are new advancements coming out nearly every month. We have, on one hand side, big tech giants working on their solutions like Document AI from Google, Amazon working on TextTrack, Microsoft working on Azure Document Intelligence. We have recent multimodal vision language models from Anthropic and OpenAI.
Yeah.
You know, the space is very, very busy these days. So we would love to hear from you how you, as a CEO and founder of Unstructured, are aiming to position the company within this broader AI ecosystem.
So when we started out, we were singularly focused on file transformation. And so how do we like our um, the kind of the key user story that motivated a lot of our work was, as a user, I have an S3 bucket with 1 million files, and I have Excel files and PDFs and Word documents and who knows what. And I want to be able to use that in conjunction with a machine learning model, right? And so how do I make that as easy as possible? And so our open source project that we launched was really focused on exactly that, on kind of prototype grade tooling to make it effortless, just to get that data into a usable format. Maybe you want to label it, maybe you want to curate it for foundation model training, maybe you want to use it for inference. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. But let's make that file transformation step easy and just good enough, right, to get through a POC or prototyping or science fair project. And that was the extent of our ambitions on open source. As the market has evolved at this absolutely incredible pace, and we've had this privilege of having kind of a front row seat to not only the explosion and the performance of these foundation models, but then also developments and architectures on how these models are being used with RAG and GraphRag and continuous post training and so on and so forth. And so the way that we're thinking about it is actually really simple, right? File transformation is always going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge predicated on quality, speed, and cost, right? And that's your iron triangle. But that's not enough. That's enough for a prototype. But if you are a large organization, typically you're producing somewhere between 500,000 to a couple million new documents a day, say 10 pages each. How are you going to move that much data from its raw state into a Gen AI data layer that scales, that meets compliance, and not only gets transformed into JSON or Markdown, but it's also chunked. You generate, structured data for GraphRag, potentially. You generate embeddings. You take all of that and write that to a downstream location. That's more than just a file transformation task that can be solved with a single API call. Those are really complex DAGs that require the orchestration of dozens of models, these cocktails of models. And so where we've focused most of our investments over the past 18 months has been actually away from pure file transformation and more towards end-to-end ingestion and pre-processing, starting with the source connector, going through file transformation, chunking, embedding, and then being able to write that downstream using a combination of in-house models, but then also third-party models. So we'll connect to a Gemini, we'll connect to Anthropic, OpenAI, Bedrock models, so that we can tailor those pipelines to whatever's most important for the customer. And so for them, it might be extreme low latency, it might be minimized costs, or the other one might be, hey, these are extraordinarily challenging documents. We'll take whatever's, if it's slow, we don't care. If it's expensive, we don't care. We just need extremely high quality. And so we can curate those cocktails of models for specific pipelines to meet their needs. And then those can evolve over time as new models become available or are upgraded.
Wow, this is, I want to continue that topic. So, we've been with you for quite some time and we've been observing that kind of journey of your product. And as you mentioned, you started with the open source and then you moved to paid API. And right now you're at the place where you're launching an enterprise platform. And I'm curious, like, how you got to that point. So, like, what were the key factors driving your kind of product decision-making process at every stage? And how did you assess the market? Like, now is the time to move, to the next stage. Like, now is the moment. Like, how did you get there along the way?
So when we were first starting out, so when we raised our first $5 million in the summer of 2022, I had, I like to joke, product market fit PTSD from Primer, where we really struggled to find generalizable product market fit. We were able to build products for individual customers, but it was really difficult to transfer those solutions to other customers without a huge amount of additional custom work. And so you might say overcorrected, but I said, you know what we're going to do is I'm very skeptical that in our first year we're going to be able to develop any defensible intellectual property. Instead, what we should strive for is one, awareness, and two, an understanding of what the market wants, so we can have extreme resolution on how to achieve product market fit. Those were the motivating factors for building under an Apache 2 license initially. So that was July, November. That November, ChatGPT launched. That December, everyone dusted off the rag paper, right? Vector DBs, LangChain, Llama Index kind of exploded in popularity over that winter. We launched our containers, our containerized version of our API that March, and usage exploded. And so from March through the summer, we saw we got an enormous amount of market feedback. And what we were noticing is that one, we had kind of two choices here. We had a choice to become a model company focused on file transformation, or we could think of ourselves a little bit more broadly and think about how do we just simplify this for our customers and make it easy for them to get data into vector DBs. And I was very skeptical of our ability as a small startup to get into a shootout with OpenAI or Anthropic or DeepMind for that matter over file transformation. I thought look, these are extraordinarily well capitalized companies. They're going to solve this and it's going to get better. And so let them take care of that. Instead, let's think about the overall user experience. I'm a data scientist, right? That's been CIO has tasked my team with figuring out Gen AI, right, for our company. And we have 70 use cases. And I'm sitting here panicking, thinking, how are like, okay, we have these 70 use cases. We're going to do all these POCs. They don't really care about like the minutia of the model necessarily. What they care about is like, how do I get good data so I can go worry about the temperature settings on the LLM or how we're doing retrieval, right? And how we're doing traces or so on and so forth. Like that's where a lot of the action is. And so at that point I said, look, we have good like good market awareness, awareness of our brand, of we have great feedback on our open source project. We have good contributions. Let's just position this as prototype grade tooling to help you. And then let's go heads down and build on like what it's going to be required to take these folks from prototype into production. And that was a long journey. That, I mean, it took us almost 18 months to build out our platform because we didn't want to start with Apache NiFi. We didn't want to use Airflow. We didn't want to use some of these standard data engineering tools. We wanted to build it from the ground up, purpose built for Gen AI. And we knew that was going to be a big undertaking. But if the market continued in the direction it would, that we'd be able to monetize it at some point.
Got it. Thank you.
Gotcha. Yeah, predicting the market these days is very hard. And
Yeah.
you mentioned that there was a release of GPT and then a release of the RAG paper that changed many things. I'm curious if you could share with us one thing that happened in Gen AI market or Gen AI research space that you completely didn't expect, and maybe how Unstructured as a company shifted the strategy to account for that.
I didn't expect multimodal models to improve as quickly as they did. So, ChatGPT was a text to text model, right? And we were just focused on text to text and text to embedding models for the most part. There was some text to image models, diffusion models, but that was in like an entirely different ecosystem of technology, right? But image to text came, I think, a lot more quickly than anybody in the industry realized, and it works great. I mean, it's
Mm.
fantastic, and they've made such rapid progress there that it's unbelievably exciting. But if you were to have asked me in 2023, when are we going to have some great image to text models? I would have said, look, it's probably going to be a couple of years, 2, 3 years at least. But holy smokes, I've been blown away at how quickly the big companies have been able to output like really high quality. I mean, right now under the hood, we're using both like OpenAI and Anthropic. I think we have a little bit of a bias towards Anthropic right now, just because they're better on some like technical schematics and things like that. But through a combination of tooling where you can optimize prompting, we use kind of LangChain ecosystem of tooling for that in combination with like Anthropic models, but there's others that are coming up as well. Um, Incredible performance on image to text, and so I've been really excited by that.
Yeah, with these new advancements in VLMs, I think that the spectrum of tools for the data processing is wider than we ever had. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, we have different models with different performance and different cost trade-offs, right? We have traditional approaches, convolutional neural networks like YOLO-X, vision transformers like Dino, and we are finishing on the multimodal vision language models that you just mentioned. And on top of these different models, different users will have different requirements and expectations. So I'm curious how you make decisions on which of these should be exposed to your clients and how they fit into your broader value proposition.
So I'm previewing some new stuff that's going to be rolling out in the next quarter or two.
That's why we
Um,
are having this interview.
I'm taking notes
so
already.
so over the next, call it 90 days, we are going to rapidly add as many models as we can. Together AI, Bedrock, all the usual suspects as these model serving companies, but then also all their models. Most of our R&D investments right now are going into how do you decide which models to use based on customer inputs. And so we're doing some really interesting work around sampling. Let's go back to that canonical user story. I'm a user who has a bunch of shit in an S3 bucket. Pardon my language. A highly heterogeneous data set in an S3 bucket. I don't want to worry about should I be using DBRX or GB40 mini or something. I have no idea. I have no idea which chunking strategy I ought to use. I should be able to lean on Unstructured to recommend a particular cocktail of model and settings to output data that's going to give my application the highest likelihood of success, right? And so, so that means auto recommenders for embedding models, auto recommenders for chunking strategies, auto recommenders for VLMs, for text-to-text models, so on and so forth. And so it's going to get really interesting where as we add an ever-increasing number of models for each of these categories, we'll continuously do three things. Monitor latency of the models slash uptime, cost of the models, and then performance of the models. And performance is going to really hinge on the particular data sets that they're being used against, but be able to kind of continuously and dynamically update pipelines for whatever's important to the customer, cost, speed, performance. And so I want the user experience to be more similar to like Google Maps. Like, hey, we found a route that's 5 minutes faster. Do you want to accept this new route? Or just automatically route you that way, and you don't really care. You're just following Google Maps, right? And it's making those decisions for you. You couldn't care less, right? That I think that's the future that we're going to be in, where we see a commoditization of each of the category of these models as they proliferate, and then really the game is how quickly can we adapt these pipelines given changes in the model price, speed, performance, availability for whatever's most important for the customer.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just like in Google Maps, as new roads are being built, as new models will be built, then you can recommend new solutions for your customers, and it
That's exactly
automatically
right.
gets the best choice.
Or if there's traffic and we're seeing extreme latency, like last month, uh, Anthropic, their API was down for like 2.5 days, right? We should be able to reroute that traffic to like a Bedrock hosted instance of Claude or to OpenAI, right? Or a Gemini model instead. And the user shouldn't see failed jobs. They should see, oh, is rerouted to the next best option, and I didn't have to worry about it, right? And so that's a lot of the software engineering work that we're undertaking right now.
That's really interesting. So, okay, so Unstructured is this model cocktail machine,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And from what I'm hearing from you as well, like you're very much user driven, like you focused on users, you want to stay there, like you very much care about the user experience as well. So I'm thinking, when I look at large enterprises, and I think about RAG applications overall, for me at least, their functionalities are relatively similar. But where it differs is the setup that is required. So they have unique workflows. You mentioned, the number of documents, the quality of the documents can be, very different, sometimes extremely challenging. There's a question of on-premise versus cloud. So there's a lot of complexities. And I wonder how Unstructured handles those complexities to match those diverse needs of your end customers.
We're building towards a future that I think is going to have a lot of parallels with the modern data stack. So just to refresh, like this is a grossly oversimplified version. ETL, ELT leads to a data warehouse or data lakehouse today. And then you slap some BI tools on top of that, right? And so your BI tools and whatever analytics you're trying to drive rest on the quality of the data that you've joined in the lakehouse, right? And that rest on the ELT or ETL tooling that you have to the left of that. And so you've effectively staged all this data, right, in Snowflake or Databricks or BigQuery, so you can do this. I think the most likely scenario right now is that as these applications are successful, or are generating a large amount of customer demand internally to these companies, that it's going to create pressure to create a parallel and complementary architecture where they'll stage Gen AI ready data in vector and graph DBs, right? And so I'm not sure at the application level if the way that the data is curated in the vector or graph DBs matters a whole lot. I think it's really a matter of like, what's the quality of that? Like, what's we internally we talk about as information loss. So if you're a human reading the raw document, you have zero information loss, right? But as you're undertaking those transformations to store it into a vector DB and then ultimately deliver it to a context window when it's needed, right? How do you minimize that information loss all the way through there? That doesn't vary a whole lot depending on the applications. And so it's really a matter of like maintaining fidelity or maximum fidelity all the way through and being able to calibrate like the investment that you make in the like investment meaning it might be cheapest just to jam everything through some Python parsers, right? And then dump for whatever text might be extractable, but then you're losing all the images, right? And so you're losing all of that context. And so, okay, so now I'm going to send the images to a VLM, right? And have them rendered. Well, I have decisions on like what prompts I want to give that VLM for how detailed of descriptions I want. And then once I have everything into a text native format, do I want to extract triples? Do I want to extract NER? Do I want to extract topics, like other types of structured data that I could index into Neo4j alongside that? That's additional cost, that's additional latency and complexity that I have to deal with. And so I think it's really a matter of discovery of like what's the right level of investment on that data in order for those applications to deliver, the results that our users expect. And
Get it.
so I know that's a long answer, but that's at least kind of like how we're thinking about it, Tomas.
Get it. Thank you.
Makes sense. Let me shift the focus a bit, and I have a weird question. I wanted to talk about UX in terms of AI adoption. We hear more and more these days that many of these RAG tools are stuck in the POC phase, and they are struggling to enter production level. So I wanted to ask, given your amazing company branding and the world-class website, what's your take on the impact of UX on the pace of AI adoption? How will Unstructured approach the design to make AI as accessible and intuitive for your users? And in general, what do you think the impact of UX is on AI adoption?
This is a really interesting question. I think it's an awesome question. I think it depends on who your user group, your core users are. And so for like the large enterprises that we work with, they are starting to move these POCs into production, and I think, they're figuring out which areas are going to be able to move into production the most rapidly. But their users are non-technical, by and large, are non-technical users, right? Morgan Stanley on recommendations for investment portfolios. These people don't like these private wealth management folks. They don't know anything about AI, and they
Mm.
shouldn't have to, right? They just want something that works, right? Logistics, right? Someone that works in shipping and receiving and like a logistics department or something like that. They don't care. They just want like it to uh accelerate like their regular business that they're having to do, right? Help them get out the door faster. And so I think the challenge has been over the last year and a half has just been that the overall performance of these applications hasn't been there. I think there's been a lot of talk about, hey, we need to get out of a chat interface, we need to move away from this UX. Yeah, but like these things largely sucked in terms of their performance. Like they're terrible. They were really cool. Like if you were showing somebody else, like on Twitter, who is part of like the RAG, like community. But like if I were to show my mom this stuff, she'd be like, "What's the big deal? Like this thing sucks most of the time." And I think that's been a function of two things. One, not UX. It's been a function of um, the data and architecture on the one hand, and then two, the performance of the models. Right, the models were cool enough for like parlor tricks, but they weren't good enough to like actually rewire how business is done in these organizations. And so I know this is a bit contrarian, but I think like that's been the limiting factor, has just been that a lot of these things have sucked and haven't been very good. Now, I think we're coming out of that. Like the models are getting a lot better, and we're figuring out how to curate great data and index it in the right way to give it a chance of success. So it's like, okay, now we're having more success. How ought we nest this into workflows? And so I'm going to talk about two things. First, from a consumer standpoint, you have Mark Benioff talking about like agents every 2 seconds, and you got Satya Nadella saying that like applications are dead, right? Sure, that's not going to happen for a couple years at least, because agents aren't good enough yet to do much of anything besides like the most simple tasks in production settings. But it's going to happen at some point that you get out of like a single like an application, and you have assistants that are just driving things all over the place. That vision, I think, is a shared vision, but I don't think we're ready for that UX quite yet, right? We still need like a high degree of control just because the performance hasn't been there. You know, who was it? Was it Benioff that clapped back at Satya and called Copilot Clippy 2.0, right?
Yep.
And so I think there's like a little bit of truth to that. On our side, we have we love them, but these you know, very opinionated engineering users, right? Who want to see logs, they want maximum control, but then they want us to take care of a bunch of stuff also. And so we have like these two things. And so for us, the more we automate, the more we actually have to show our homework at the same time and give control. And so I think there's going to be a fundamental divergence in like tools for consumers on mass market probably will drive towards like agentic experiences and exit a chat experience, or one with a that mirrors a traditional application faster than ones that have highly technical and mature user and like mature users like we have, where they want everything. They want to be able to have it on autopilot, but then they want to be able to crack it open and tinker it with like every little knob and switch and everything. And we're going to give it to them. But that I think that's the key here, and this is the theme that we've been talking on is like list like let the customers vote, right? Like listen to the customers and just build what they want, right? And if something's not ready for it, don't force it on them, or else it's going to blow up in your face because the tech's just not ready for it yet.
Interesting. So you think 2025 is the year of agentic systems, or not yet?
I think the 2025 is a year of blowing a bunch of cash on agentic systems.
Okay.
But I don't know if 2025 is when like agentic systems actually explode. I'm going to say 2027 is probably the year that
2027.
agentic.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a little while. These things are going to, yeah, they're not there yet. But hey, I was wrong on BLM, so hopefully I'm wrong again too. So we'll see.
Now I just wonder which one will kind of explode first. Like as you said, technical users versus kind of, you know, normal users, let's call them. Like which one is more critical to the success of the solution, really?
You're going to see a lot of blurring of lines on what's like RPA versus agents, and everyone's going to call RPA agents and then claim that they have their agents in production. I think that's great. That's fine. Whatever. It's marketing, right? RPA works awesome, right? And so, but agents, I think, are a fundamentally different technology, and so you're going to see some blurred lines, and it'll be difficult to discern what's traditional RPA versus agentic
All right.
solutions.
2027.
Maybe the question should have been what's the marketing impact on the AI adoption?
Yeah, true.
UX.
Yeah, there you go.
More precise, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's shift again. So I'm a partnership person, and I'm looking at your partnerships, Brian, and you have some exciting partnerships with NVIDIA and Databricks. And I'm just curious, when you look at those partnerships, how do they really increase your competitive edge in the market? And then looking forward, you mentioned, you know, 27 beyond, like looking forward at the ecosystem, broader processing, like data processing ecosystem. What do you think, what collaborations will be critical for your business?
For us, we want to be the first and better. Like we have around 60,000 companies that are using us like almost every day on our open source side of things. As they move into production and they make buying decisions on what they want, on how they want to get their data to storage, we want them to stick with unstructured and move towards like a production contract with them. And so as part of that overall kind of business objective, right? We're friends with every single storage company, right? And we want to play nice with everybody. And so if you're a company that uses Mongo, or a company that uses Databricks, or a company that uses Snowflake, right? We want to make it effortless for you to use them even more, right? And we'll help you be successful with that. And so as a result, and as a result of like our focus, like just really intense focus on ingestion and pre-processing, we've been able to carve out these really fabulous partnerships with a lot of the storage companies, but then also companies that are in the consulting space that are piecing these things together, and others in order to kind of advance those objectives. And so I think that um, really continuing to activate and deepen these partnerships with those folks is going to be really critical to our success. Second thing is on the model side of things. We we think about ourselves as like Grand Central Station. We want to be connected everywhere, and you don't have to have trade-offs. Like if you want to use, Azure's Azure AI Document Intelligence or Textract or whatever, just use it through us, and we'll do that for that step of file transformation, no problem, and move on. And so hyperscalers, and then also the relationships with the model developing model makers is going to be essential as well. And so those are areas where we're spending a lot of time in order to create the value for our customers.
Get it. Thanks so much.
So let me finish with this one last question that we always ask. When thinking about the future, Brian, what aspects of the upcoming year excite you the most regarding the progress in AI? And what role do you envision Unstructured playing in this evolving landscape?
I think the enterprise search is exploding. Like it had a big year last year, and Glean leapt out to like a huge lead. But I think that enterprise search is the area that's adopting the fastest, or the use case that's seeing the fastest adoption. And I'm really excited for the role that we can play in advancing an enterprise search use case for like a range of customers that are using Glean, that are using other sort of tooling. And so I think we're going to see really continue to see really incredible model advancements in chip, advancements in storage. But I think from a practical standpoint, the value being created, I'm really, really excited about enterprise search and how these foundation models can really create an enormous amount of value very rapidly. And so it's very practical, it's unsexy, but it's one where companies are seeing an extremely high ROI very quickly. And so that's the public markets are creating a lot more pressure to show ROI of these Gen AI investments. And this may be the year of agents. I hope it's the year of ROI as well. And so that's actually that's what we have our sights set on.
Thank you. Thank you for this response. I will say, Brian, that being with you on this journey for the last year has been an exceptional experience for us here at deepsense. Thank you for participating in this VIP Deep Talk. We enjoyed the chat, and we hope that you enjoyed it too.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian.
This was Brian Raymond of Unstructured. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.